So if you want to completely guarantee that a new diet or, a workout routine is going to spectacularly fail, the absolute best thing you can do is start it on a Monday morning with a massive, intense burst of motivation.
Oh, yeah, just completely overhaul everything all at once.
Exactly. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are looking at the actual neurology behind why your brain treats extreme self-improvement as a literal survival threat, and how a totally counterintuitive framework from Japan solves this exact problem.
It is so incredibly common. You
Right.
wake up, you're just completely disgusted with your current habits, and you decide that today is the day you change your entire life.
Right, the classic Monday morning panic.
Yeah, you throw out all the junk food, you buy the grilled chicken and broccoli, you set the alarm for 5 in the morning to run, and the motivation you feel in that exact moment is completely genuine. You really are ready to change.
But then you fast forward to, like, Wednesday night. You slept terribly because of that early alarm. Work was incredibly stressful. The kids are chaotic, and your central nervous system is just fried.
Completely depleted.
Yeah, and the idea of lacing up your running shoes just feels like a sick joke. So you end up eating takeout over the kitchen sink at 8 at night, feeling this intense wave of guilt and thinking, well, I blew it. I will just try again next month.
And that cycle is just exhausting. But the most important thing to understand right out of the gate is that if this sounds familiar, you are not broken. You don't lack willpower.
Which is what everybody thinks, right? That they're just lazy.
Exactly. But you are not genetically wired to be a failure. The reality is that most of us have just never been taught the biological mechanics of how to make change practical. We rely on massive bursts of motivation, which is essentially trying to power a cross-country road trip with a bottle of rocket fuel.
Right.
It burns incredibly hot for about 3 seconds, and then you were just stranded on the side of the road.
All right, let's get into it because we have a case study today that completely shatters that whole go hard or go home mentality. It involves this Japanese philosophy, a really fascinating physician, and it all centers around a guy named Christopher.
Yeah, so Christopher's situation perfectly illustrates this trap of the massive overhaul. He was 40 years old, and he weighed about 142 kilograms.
Which is what, around 313 pounds?
Right around there, yeah. And he was a warehouse manager. He'd been doing that exact job for 15 years.
Just the classic grind, waking up in the dark, commuting, not getting home until the evening, dealing with a stack of bills.
Very relatable for a lot of people. He was a provider. He poured all his energy into keeping his family afloat. But in the process, the maintenance of his own physical body just fell entirely off the radar.
Yeah.
Breakfast was whatever he could eat while driving. Lunch was rushed at his desk. Dinner usually happened, just zoned out in front of a screen because his cognitive battery was completely empty by the time he got home.
And the weekends were probably just recovering from the week.
Exactly. Heavily reliant on highly processed takeout and alcohol just to artificially bring his stress levels down.
And his body was clearly flashing the check engine light. Like, the notes mention that just walking up a single flight of stairs left him breathless.
It is severe.
And tying his shoes. I mean, he had to sit on the edge of the bed, hold his breath, and mechanically compress his own stomach just to reach the laces.
He was facing a really severe metabolic crisis. His children would ask him to play outside, and he always had an excuse ready. His wife would ask to go for an evening walk, and he was always just too physically depleted.
But it's important to note he had tried to fix it.
Oh, absolutely. He had done the extreme gym membership thing for a few weeks before burning out. He had tried those aggressive low-carb diets.
The rocket fuel approach.
Right. And because those failed, he had settled into a really dangerous psychological state, which is learned helplessness. He essentially convinced himself he just had terrible genetics, a broken metabolism, and a schedule that made health impossible.
But then the breaking point happens, and this specific moment in the source material is honestly just jarring.
It really is. So it was a Saturday afternoon. Christopher was sitting in a plastic chair in his backyard, just watching his 9-year-old son kick a soccer ball around.
Okay.
The ball rolls over into a slightly muddy patch in the neighbor's garden. His son asks him to grab it. So Christopher walks over, bends down to pick up the ball, and he cannot get back up.
And just to be clear, he didn't, tear a ligament or pull a muscle.
No acute injury at all.
Right.
He simply did not possess the muscular strength in his posterior chain to lift his own body weight from a bent-over position. Gravity just won.
Oh, man.
He ended up stuck on his hands and knees in the dirt, sweating, completely unable to find the leverage to stand, and his 9-year-old boy is just standing there watching his dad struggle.
That is, I can't even imagine.
Ultimately, the neighbor had to physically come out of their house, grab Christopher under the arms, and haul him to his feet.
The sheer humiliation of that is just hard to fathom. The text points out he sat on the edge of his bed that night and just broke down. Like he was crying because he was 40 and required a rescue operation just to stand up. Yeah.
But the deeper pain was realizing this permanent memory he just encoded into his son's brain. The memory that his father was fragile.
That's the part that really hits hard. His wife sat with him and very gently told him that things had to change and that he really needed outside help. And in almost every conventional narrative, this is the exact moment where the protagonist wakes up the next day, throws away every carbohydrate in the house, and signs up for some brutal boot camp.
Right, the panic response.
Yeah.
Because the pain of the humiliation makes you want to basically punish yourself with a restrictive diet.
Exactly. But he didn't do that. Instead, he reached out to a friend who had successfully lost a significant amount of weight and, crucially, kept it off.
And that friend directed him away from the intense fitness gurus and sent him to a Japanese doctor named Dr. Takeshi Yamamoto.
Yes, and Dr. Yamamoto practiced a completely different kind of medicine. The source describes his office as incredibly minimalist. No posters of the human muscular system on the walls, no intimidating medical scales. Just a quiet room looking out at a garden.
Sounds peaceful. It was. So Christopher sits down and just unloads everything. The shame, the incident in the dirt, the desperation to drop the weight immediately.
And Dr. Yamamoto just listens, right?
Yeah.
And then asks him how many times he's tried to lose weight in the past.
Yeah, and Christopher admits to 3 or 4 major attempts, none of which lasted longer than a couple of months. The doctor stops him from listing off his usual excuses about his metabolism or his busy schedule.
Right.
He just looks at him and says, "You keep failing because you're trying to win a 40-year war in 2 months."
That reframing is just brilliant.
It completely changes the scope of the problem. Christopher's body took 40 years of microscopic daily decisions to reach a weight of 142 kilograms.
Decades of habit building.
Exactly. His neural pathways spent 40 years hardwiring the habit of eating in the car and zoning out in front of the television. The assumption that you can aggressively overwrite 4 decades of biology and neurology in 60 days is just mathematically and biologically absurd.
So let's dig into the biology of that, because the source material brings up some really fascinating research out of Stanford regarding how the brain interprets massive, sudden changes.
It's so important to understand this part.
Because we usually think of starting a diet as this positive, healthy choice. But our nervous system reads it completely differently, doesn't it?
Completely differently. Our brain's primary overriding objective is to keep us alive. And the way it does that is by predicting the environment. It loves routine because routine is safe.
Even if the routine is unhealthy.
Exactly. So when you suddenly introduce a massive change, like let's say you cut your caloric intake in half and start doing high-intensity interval training when you've been sedentary for a decade, your brain does not understand that you are trying to improve your cardiovascular health.
What does it actually think is happening then?
It thinks you are in the middle of a catastrophic famine and you are being hunted. From an evolutionary perspective, the only reason an animal suddenly stops eating and starts sprinting every single day is if the food supply has vanished and a predator is giving chase.
That makes so much sense when you put it like that.
Right. So the hypothalamus, which is a tiny region at the base of your brain, detects the sudden deficit in energy and triggers the HPA axis. That is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
So it essentially sounds the biological alarm bells.
It floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline. It is a literal stress response. Your brain immediately starts fighting your willpower.
How does it fight back?
It increases the production of a hormone called ghrelin, which makes you feel ravenously hungry. And it specifically makes you crave high-density, high-fat, high-sugar foods because it believes you need to store energy to survive this famine.
And at the same time, doesn't it downregulate your non-exercise activity thermogenesis?
Yes, meaning it makes you feel deeply lethargic so you stop burning precious calories. It makes you want to lie on the couch and eat a donut. You are not fighting a lack of motivation. You are fighting millions of years of evolutionary survival mechanisms.
That is wild.
This is called allostatic load. When the stress of the new routine exceeds your biological capacity to adapt, the brain pulls the emergency brake and forces you back to your baseline.
That completely explains the Wednesday night collapse. You were trying to yank the steering wheel of a speeding car at 90 miles an hour instead of gently tapping the brakes and merging lanes. Of course, the car just flips over.
That's a great way to look at it.
So Christopher is sitting in this office, desperate, needing to lose 50 kilos just to save his own life. Given everything we just talked about, Dr. Yamamoto's actual prescription for him sounds, I don't know, almost medically negligent.
I know, it sounds crazy at first.
Hmm.
Dr. Yamamoto tells Christopher that he's only going to make one single solitary change to his life.
Just one.
Just one.
Yeah.
Every morning when he wakes up, before he checks his phone or leaves the bedroom, he's going to drink one glass of water.
Yeah.
That is the entire medical intervention.
Okay, wait, I have to challenge this premise. I get the idea of starting small, but Christopher is morbidly obese. He is facing immediate life-threatening cardiovascular issues.
Right.
Isn't it incredibly dangerous for a doctor to delay actual caloric restriction or real medical intervention just to prove a psychological point about habit building? Like, why not have him drink the water and also cut out the junk food?
It sounds totally counterintuitive, but the doctor recognizes that if you give Christopher a diet plan right now, that Stanford threat response will activate. He will quit in a week, which actually puts him at an even higher risk of a cardiac event due to the yo-yo effect on his blood pressure.
Ah.
The immediate crisis isn't actually the calories. The immediate crisis is a complete lack of self-efficacy.
Self-efficacy meaning his belief that he can actually execute a plan.
Precisely. This introduces the Japanese concept of Kaizen. The direct translation is continuous improvement through small, microscopic changes. But to understand why Kaizen works on the brain, you have to look at its history.
Because it wasn't originally a wellness concept.
No, not at all. It became globally recognized after World War II in Japan, heavily influenced by an American statistician named W. Edwards Deming.
Deming was brought in to help rebuild the Japanese industrial sector.
Yes. Specifically, Kaizen became the backbone of the Toyota production system. Instead of making massive, disruptive overhauls to the assembly line, Toyota empowered every single worker to find microscopic ways to improve their specific station every single day.
So they weren't redesigning the whole factory overnight.
Exactly. If a worker found a tiny defect, they pulled a cord, stopped the line, and fixed it so it never happened again. Over years, those compounded microscopic improvements made Toyota one of the most efficient, high-quality manufacturers on the planet.
Okay, so Dr. Yamamoto is basically applying post-war industrial manufacturing principles to a guy's nervous system.
He is hacking the dopamine reward prediction error. Think about Christopher's relationship with himself. Every time he started a diet on Monday and quit by Wednesday, he trained his brain to view his own promises as lies.
Right. If you have a friend who constantly cancels plans at the last minute, you eventually stop believing them when they say they will show up.
Christopher's brain stopped believing his own intentions. He was a flake to his own subconscious.
Man, that is a tough realization.
So the glass of water is a task so microscopically small that it sneaks completely under the radar of the amygdala. The brain does not view a glass of water as a threat, so there is no cortisol spike, no HPA axis alarm. It requires zero motivation to execute.
So day 1, he drinks the water. Day 2, he drinks the water. And what is actually happening neurobiologically when he does that?
Every time he completes this tiny promised action, his brain gets a micro hit of dopamine. Not the massive rush you get from eating sugar, but a quiet, steady release that signals, hey, we did the thing we said we were going to do. Dopamine is a learning chemical. It physically reinforces the neural pathway associated with that action.
And the source notes that by day 7, something shifted in his routine.
He woke up a few minutes before his alarm, and before he even fully opened his eyes, his brain generated the thought, where is my glass of water?
His brain was anticipating the habit. The friction was just completely gone.
He did it for 14 days straight. He went back to Dr. Yamamoto's office. He hadn't lost a single pound, and he felt a little foolish, but he also felt something he hadn't felt in a decade, which was quiet pride.
He had proven to his own brain that he could execute a daily commitment without failing.
The foundation of self-trust was poured.
Which is such a powerful takeaway for anyone listening. Like, if you are stuck in a rut, do not try to fix your diet, your sleep, and your exercise all at once.
Please don't.
Pick a habit so small it feels almost insulting to your intelligence. Stretch your hamstrings for 60 seconds. Take 3 deep breaths before opening your email. Just do it to repair the trust between your intention and your action.
Absolutely. So once that trust was established, Christopher was ready for step 2. He goes back to the doctor, and the doctor says, keep drinking the water. Now, we address the food, but we do it with Kaizen.
Okay, so how do you apply Kaizen to a guy who copes with stress by eating an entire pizza? You can't just tell him to eat one less pepperoni.
The doctor gives him a very specific behavioral constraint rather than a caloric one. He tells Christopher to take whatever amount of food he normally eats for dinner and physically divide it in half on his plate.
Okay.
He is absolutely allowed to eat the second half. There is no restriction on quantity. But when he finishes the first half, he must set a timer and wait exactly 20 minutes before he starts eating the second half.
That brings up the next major concept from the source material, which is hara-hachi-bu.
It is a teaching originating from Okinawa, Japan, which happens to be one of the world's blue zones where people routinely live past 100.
Right.
Hara-hachi-bu essentially translates to eating until you're 80% full and then stopping.
See, the philosophy sounds nice, but mechanically, how does a 20-minute timer force you to eat less? I mean, if I put half my dinner in front of me, eat it, and then just stare at the wall for 20 minutes, I am just going to be agonizingly anticipating the rest of the meal.
It all comes down to the endocrine system and the logistics of how the human body processes satiety. We have a hormone called leptin, which is often called the satiety hormone.
Okay.
Here's the fascinating part. Leptin is not produced in your stomach. It is synthesized and released by your adipose tissue, which are your fat cells.
Wait, really? Your fat cells tell your brain to stop eating?
Yes. As you eat and your body starts processing the energy, your fat cells release leptin into your bloodstream. But it takes time. The leptin has to travel through your circulatory system, it has to physically cross the blood-brain barrier, and then it has to bind to specific receptors in a part of the hypothalamus called the arcuate nucleus.
It's like waiting for a really complex internet connection to finally load the web page.
That is a perfect analogy. The chemical logistics chain simply takes time, roughly 20 minutes from the start of a meal, for the signal to become strong enough for your conscious brain to register that you actually have enough energy.
But hold on. If Christopher has been severely overeating for over a decade, isn't his leptin system broken? Like, I have read that obesity causes leptin resistance, where the brain basically goes deaf to the signal because there is so much inflammation.
That's right.
So if his receptors are desensitized, does waiting 20 minutes even work?
That is a brilliant point, and you are absolutely right about leptin resistance. His brain was likely struggling to read the leptin signal. However, leptin isn't the only mechanism. By slowing down and waiting 20 minutes, he allows a second biological system to catch up, which is the gastric stretch receptors.
Stretch receptors, like physical sensors in the stomach wall.
Exactly. As the stomach fills with food and water, the physical stretching of the tissue activates mechanoreceptors. These receptors send signals up the vagus nerve directly to the brainstem, signaling fullness.
Ah, I see.
When Christopher was eating rapidly in front of the television, he was shoveling food in so fast that he overwhelmed the physical stretch capacity of his stomach before the vagus nerve could properly communicate the distress to his brain.
Oh, we have all experienced that. You are at a restaurant, you're starving, you just crush the breadbasket, you eat a huge entree in 10 minutes, and you feel totally fine.
Yep.
Then on the car ride home, that 20-minute delay hits, the signals finally reach the brain, and suddenly you feel physically ill. You have to unbutton your jeans because you ate 130% of your capacity before the internet connection loaded.
Exactly. So for the first week, this exercise was deeply uncomfortable for Christopher. He would finish his half plate in 3 minutes, look at the timer, and his brain would just scream for the rest of the food.
Because it still wanted that dopamine hit.
Right. But because he had built that self-trust with the water, he actually had the discipline to wait.
And what happened after the 20 minutes?
By the time the timer went off, the stretch receptors and whatever leptin was getting through had finally reached his hypothalamus. The frantic biological panic to eat had faded into a gentle realization that he actually had enough energy. Over the course of 3 weeks, he only went back to eat the second half of his plate twice.
That is wild. He didn't have to summon the willpower to starve himself. He just let his own biology do the heavy lifting.
He lost 3 kilograms in those 3 weeks. He didn't change what he was eating at all. He just changed the pacing, allowing his body's natural satiety mechanisms to function properly for the first time in years.
It is such a simple elegant biological workaround. When you actually understand the machinery of your own body, you stop fighting it and you start working with it. Knowledge really is your best personal trainer.
He really is.
That is essentially the entire philosophy behind BeFit.ai, just helping people understand fitness and wellness mechanics in a way that actually clicks and makes sense for daily life. There are plenty of free articles over there if you want a simple breakdown of the endocrine system or habit loops after we finish up here.
And honestly, if this deep dive is shifting how you view your own routines, leaving a like or dropping a quick comment really does mean a lot to us. It helps us know what kind of research is actually useful, and it genuinely keeps us excited to keep putting these deep dives together.
Definitely. So Christopher has the glass of water anchoring his morning, and he has the 20-minute Hara Hachibu rule, managing his caloric intake without triggering a stress response. He is dropping a little weight, and the learned helplessness is starting to lift. What does Dr. Yamamoto introduce next?
Well, the doctor knows that caloric management alone will not fix Christopher's cardiovascular health. He needs to move. But more importantly, the doctor knows that the novelty of losing a few kilograms is going to wear off eventually. Christopher needs a deeper structural reason to keep going when things get hard.
Let me guess. Kaizen applied to cardio. He has to do 1 push-up a day.
Very close. The doctor tells Christopher that his new assignment is to walk to his mailbox and back every single morning.
The mailbox at the end of his driveway, we are talking what, 20 meters?
20 meters total. When Dr. Yamamoto prescribed this, Christopher actually laughed. He told the doctor walking to the end of the driveway isn't exercise. It's not going to burn any calories.
Which is true.
And Dr. Yamamoto replied, "You are right. It is not exercise. It is identity architecture. Your body has forgotten that it was designed for movement. We are going to remind it very gently without triggering an alarm."
Identity architecture. That completely shifts the goalpost. It is not about burning 50 calories. It is about proving to himself that he is now a person who moves in the morning rather than a person who sits.
It is all about neuroplasticity. Every time he walks to the mailbox, he is laying down a new neural circuit, so he starts doing it. Water, half plate, 20-meter walk. But on the third day, a massive shift occurs naturally.
What happens?
His 7-year-old daughter is eating cereal in the kitchen, sees him putting on his shoes to go outside, and asks if she can come with him.
Oh, man.
He takes her hand, and they walk down the driveway together. And because it is just a slow walk, and he isn't exhausted from a grueling workout, he actually has the breath and the mental presence to talk to her.
Right.
She starts telling him about a problem she was having with a friend at school, things she had never shared with him, because his previous baseline was just being too tired to engage.
He was physically present for the first time.
When they got back to the front door, she looked at him and asked, "Can we do this every morning?"
So this tiny clinical task suddenly transforms into the emotional highlight of his day.
Within a week, they weren't just going to the mailbox. They naturally extended the walk down the street to the corner store. Not because a spreadsheet told him to increase his step count by 10%, but because he genuinely wanted to prolong the conversation with his daughter.
That's beautiful.
His resting heart rate started dropping, his back pain lessened. When he went back to see Dr. Yamamoto 1 month later, he was down 8 kilograms.
But I imagine the physical weight wasn't even the primary focus of that appointment.
It wasn't. Dr. Yamamoto looked at him and asked, "Why are you actually doing this, Christopher? What is the real reason you are getting out of bed?" And Christopher realized the aesthetic goal of losing weight had completely vanished.
Yeah.
He told the doctor, "I want to be alive to see my kids grow up. I want to be the one who walks my daughter down the aisle. I want to feel like a capable father."
And that brings us to the core of the Japanese philosophy in the source material, which is ikigai.
Yes. Ikigai is often translated as your reason for being or the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning. Dr. Yamamoto explained to Christopher that weight loss is an incredibly weak goal because it is just an outcome.
Right.
Being a capable present father is an identity.
Yeah.
The excess weight was merely a physical obstacle blocking him from his ikigai.
Let's talk about the neuroscience of motivation versus purpose, because I think people conflate the two all the time. Motivation is largely driven by the nucleus accumbens and dopamine spikes. It is highly reactive to your mood, your blood sugar, and how much sleep you got.
It fluctuates constantly.
Exactly. If you rely on motivation to go to the gym, the moment you have a bad day at work, that dopamine signaling flatlines and you just stay home.
Right. Motivation is an emotion, and emotions are inherently volatile. Ikigai, or deep purpose, engages entirely different circuitry, primarily in the prefrontal cortex, which governs long-term planning, values, and complex decision-making.
So when Christopher wakes up on a Tuesday and it's pouring rain outside and his dopamine levels are completely depleted, he doesn't have to sit there and try to artificially hype himself up to exercise.
He bypasses the motivation center entirely and taps into the prefrontal cortex. He just thinks about his daughter's hand in his, and the action becomes non-negotiable.
It shifts the entire internal monologue from, I have to do this punishing thing to lose weight, to I get to do this thing that honors my highest priority. Purpose is basically an endless, renewable fuel source.
It really is.
So the trajectory here is incredible. He has Kaizen building self-trust, Hara Hachibu regulating his satiety hormones, and Ikigai providing the architectural purpose for his new identity. He is down 14 kilograms in a few months. He is buying new clothes. His energy is up. It sounds like the perfect linear success story.
But human behavior is never perfectly linear.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, every new neural pathway faces a stress test.
Oh, inevitably.
For Christopher, that stress test arrived in the form of a massive cultural and familial hurdle, the Thanksgiving holiday.
The ultimate graveyard of good intentions. The sheer volume of hyperpalatable food combined with family dynamics is just a nightmare for habit retention.
The source material specifically highlights social pressure as the silent killer of change. So Christopher arrives at his extended family's Thanksgiving dinner. The table is absolutely buried in high-fat, high-sugar foods. Everyone is piling their plates to the ceiling.
And Christopher tries to stick to the plan?
He sits down and attempts to implement his Harahachibu rule. He takes a modest portion and plans to wait his 20 minutes.
Let me guess how the family reacted. Because the concept of homeostasis doesn't just apply to individual biology, it applies to social groups too. When one person in a family system drastically changes their behavior, the rest of the group often unconsciously tries to force them back to the baseline because the change makes them uncomfortable.
That is exactly what happened. It is sometimes called the crabs in a bucket mentality. His mother immediately asks if he's feeling sick because he isn't eating her casserole.
No.
His brother-in-law loudly tells him to stop being so uptight, to take a day off, and physically shoves a plate of pie in front of him.
They didn't do it maliciously, probably.
No, but his discipline held a mirror up to their own lack of restraint, and they needed him to join them to validate their own choices.
And under that concentrated social and environmental pressure, the new neural pathways just couldn't hold up.
He caved. He filled his plate, and then he filled it again. He ate rapidly, blowing completely past the 20-minute leptin delay. He ate until he was physically in pain.
And then the guilt sets in.
As soon as the dopamine spike from the food wore off, an overwhelming wave of old shame came crashing down on him.
The abstinence violation effect?
There's the AVE.
It is a well-documented psychological phenomenon. It happens when someone who is committed to strict abstinence from a behavior makes a single mistake.
The classic what the hell effect. You know, you drop your smartphone, it gets a tiny scratch on the screen, and instead of just accepting the scratch, your brain says, well, the phone is ruined now, and you smash it with a hammer.
That's exactly how it feels. Christopher looked in the mirror that night, feeling bloated and defeated, and his brain told him the narrative he had believed for 40 years. You broke the streak, you are a failure, you are going to gain it all back, so what is the point of even trying tomorrow?
Man.
He was so devastated that he actually sent a text message to Dr. Yamamoto that night, apologizing and saying he messed up and was probably going to quit.
This is the critical juncture. This is where 99% of diets die. How did the doctor respond? I'm assuming he didn't send back a generic hang-in-there cat poster. Dr. Yamamoto didn't offer a motivational speech at all. He replied with two very simple questions. Did you drink your glass of water this morning?
And Christopher replied, yes.
Right. Then, did you take your walk to the mailbox? Christopher replied, yes.
Okay, so establishing that the baseline habits were still intact.
Then Dr. Yamamoto sent a message that completely rewired Christopher's perspective on failure. He wrote, you didn't fail. You just slipped. There is a profound difference between slipping and falling. Slipping is a temporary loss of balance. Falling is deciding to stay on the ground.
That is a phenomenal distinction.
It introduces the philosophy of wabi-sabi. In Japanese aesthetics, wabi-sabi is the worldview centered on the acceptance of transience and imperfection.
Like kintsugi, right. The art of repairing broken pottery with gold lacquer, highlighting the cracks rather than hiding them.
Exactly like that.
But how does that translate to behavioral psychology?
It is the shift from rigid perfectionism to psychological flexibility. The doctor explained that nothing in nature, and certainly no human biological system, operates with flawless perfection forever. The expectation that you will maintain a flawless streak of perfect eating for the rest of your life is a trap designed by the ego.
If you demand perfection, the very first time you make a mistake, cognitive dissonance kicks in, and you just abandon the entire project.
Wabi-sabi teaches that consistency actually requires the absorption of imperfection. A flawed day of eating at Thanksgiving does not erase 3 months of waking up early, drinking water, and physically walking with his daughter.
Right.
The physiological adaptations in his heart and his muscles didn't vanish because of one piece of pie.
It completely neutralizes the abstinence violation effect. It removes the catastrophic thinking. You just say, okay, the pottery cracked today. I overate. It is a data point, not a character flaw. Tomorrow is a new day.
It freed him from the incredible burden of trying to be a machine. He realized he didn't have to be flawless. He just had to be resilient.
Which leads us directly into the final hurdle. It is one thing to intellectually accept the philosophy of wabi-sabi and realize that slipping isn't falling. But when you wake up the morning after Thanksgiving and your blood sugar is a mess, your stomach hurts, and you are exhausted, how do you actually execute the action to get back on track?
You have to access Ganbaru. This is perhaps the most crucial piece of the puzzle. Ganbaru translates roughly to quiet tenacity, or the ability to endure through difficulty.
So not the rah-rah motivation.
No, it is not about loud, aggressive motivation. It is the unglamorous, gritty ability to tolerate discomfort and do the next right thing anyway.
There is some incredible neuroscience emerging right now about exactly this concept. Neuroscientists like Andrew Huberman have highlighted a specific brain structure called the anterior midcingulate cortex, or the AMCC.
Yes, the AMCC is fascinating. It acts almost like the brain's engine for distress tolerance and willpower.
Right. The research shows that when you do something that you genuinely do not want to do, like when there is high friction and you push through it anyway, the AMCC actually grows physically larger and denser. It is the neurological seat of tenacity. If you only do things when you feel motivated, that part of the brain shrinks.
So the morning after Thanksgiving, Christopher's AMCC was put to the test. He felt awful. His brain was sluggish from the heavy food, and every instinct told him to stay in bed and skip the water and the walk. But he used Ganbaru.
He sat with the deeply uncomfortable physical and emotional hangover of his mistake, and he chose to endure it.
He walked to the kitchen and drank the water. And then he put on his shoes and walked out to the mailbox. It wasn't a great walk. He felt heavy and sluggish. But the speed didn't matter. What mattered was that he proved to his nervous system that a mistake was not a reset button.
It was merely a speed bump on a continuous road.
He fortified that neural pathway of resilience. And over the next 18 months, he slipped many times. He is a human being. He overate at his son's birthday party. He had pizza and beer on particularly stressful weekends at the warehouse.
But because of wabi-sabi, he never spiraled into self-hatred.
And because of Ganbaru, the very next morning, he always, without fail, returned to his baseline: the water, the half-plate rule, and the walk.
The slips became isolated incidents rather than the start of a new downward trend.
Okay.
What was the ultimate biological result after those 18 months of compounding microscopic habits?
He lost 52 kilograms.
Yeah.
He brought his weight down to a healthy 90 kilograms. His blood pressure normalized, and he no longer required the interventions he was heading toward.
That is a staggering physical transformation.
But the source material makes a point to emphasize that the true victory wasn't the number on the clinical scale. It was a moment in his backyard, about 2 years after that humiliating day in the dirt.
What happened?
He was playing tag with his kids, actually sprinting across the grass, dodging, sweating, and laughing, completely unencumbered by his own body.
He rebuilt his physical autonomy.
Later that week, his now 12-year-old daughter was talking to her friends, and she casually mentioned that her dad was the most disciplined person she knew.
And she didn't say that because she watched him be a perfect, flawless robot for 2 years.
Exactly the opposite. She said it because she watched him mess up, she watched him struggle with failure, and she watched him use Ganbaru to get back up every single time. He didn't just alter his body composition, he fundamentally rewrote his identity from the ground up. He became the architect of his own reality.
That entire framework completely dismantles the way modern society approaches self-improvement. We are constantly sold the idea of the massive overnight transformation.
Because massive transformations are highly marketable. Small, quiet, daily changes are not.
Right. So let's briefly synthesize the 5 pillars of this architecture because they serve as a really practical blueprint. First, you need ikigai, A deep, identity-based purpose that lives in the prefrontal cortex, completely separate from fleeting motivation.
Second is Kaizen, bypassing the brain's threat detection system by taking steps so microscopic they require zero willpower, like drinking a single glass of water to rebuild self-trust.
Third is Hora Hachibu, respecting your biological lag time by slowing down and allowing your endocrine system and stretch receptors to actually communicate with your brain before you overconsume.
Fourth is wabi-sabi, rejecting the ego-driven trap of perfectionism, understanding that slipping is just a loss of balance and imperfection is a required component of long-term consistency.
And finally, Ganburu, the quiet, unglamorous tenacity to endure the discomfort of failure, engage the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, and simply execute the baseline habit the next morning. It isn't a diet. It is an operating system for the human mind.
It really is.
And that leaves us with a final thought to mull over. The global weight loss and diet industry is worth roughly $70 billion a year. That entire economic machine relies on you attempting to win a 40-year war in 2 months. They sell you the massive, punishing overhaul because it guarantees you will trigger a stress response, fail by Wednesday, and have to come back and buy their next product in January.
True autonomy is rejecting the overhaul entirely. It is a radical act of rebellion to just be quietly consistent.
So the challenge for tomorrow morning is to reject the massive overhaul. Pick one microscopic action. Drink water, stretch for 1 minute, step outside. Do it for 14 days and watch how quickly you begin to trust yourself again. Start ridiculously small and ignore the noise.
You've got this.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Take that first tiny step tomorrow and we will catch you on the next one.
Take care, everyone.